This is Breaking MedTech. I am Ryan. This is Cope. We have a video podcast where we help small medtech medical device companies grow through digital marketing and sales.
Yeah. And today's topic is fix your messaging by establishing your message. And that's the topic. And when Ryan and I were talking about it, I joked, I didn't know our messaging was broken.
Most don't.
And most are. And that's what we want to talk about today is we want to explain why you need to have messaging, even if it's bad. And we'll explain what that means. But you need it because it's I think Ryan used the term and he can describe it he's much more well-versed on this. The company's sort of North Star, right? So let's talk about this. So let's establish for a second, we'll give an example outside of med device in a minute, but when do you need messaging for your med device? You've created something, you've got approval, you're in the process and you're ready to really, at least in your mind, start talking to customers because you think they're ready to start buying, right? And that's a
You
different
should have had it
inflection
before
point.
that, but okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's a good point. So have it before then. And the funny thing is I actually think they do. They just don't recognize it.
No,
right?
it is funny when when I've talked to groups or when I've asked groups, like if I sit down and actually ask them questions, I can come up with their messaging very quickly. It's just, you should never create a website. You should never start sending emails. You should never start reaching out to people. You should never go on sales calls. Like once you have a product, even I would say like if you're doing a clinical, like you're still in the process of getting your product. Yeah. You should know your messaging at that part.
Or at least know what you think it is.
Or what you think it is.
Right.
And you're going to adjust.
And it will, like everything, it will adjust. You will adapt. It will get better every time you start doing it because you'll get feedback. It's funny. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but I talked to all these small companies. And one of the things I've learned is every one of these small med device companies has been invented by somebody who's incredibly smart and who solves clinical problems and usually like business problems. And when you distill it down, they're like, yeah, that's exactly why I invented it. It lets us do this and save time or save money or save staffing or decrease in whatever, all that stuff. But it takes me an hour to get it out of them sometimes because they're talking about their product. But I have yet to find one that somebody came up with. It was like, oh yeah, we just sort of created it because we thought, what the hell, we'll make a Me Too. Like nobody does that. And when you actually get them to think about their message, they have a hell of one. Like they really have a good message. It's just sometimes I think it takes somebody like you to yank it out of them. And then they're like, oh yeah, that's what I was talking about the whole time. You're like, well,
not really.
You were thinking it the whole time, but were you talking about it? And so let's talk about that today. So you said they should really be thinking about and doing their messaging. You said earlier, and probably, I actually think it's from concept inception many times, right? From
concept inception, they should at least be thinking about it. So like my big issue is, these people will put together a business case. They'll go raise money. They'll go make a prototype. They might even get through like the clinical aspect and get it, so not, as you and I often like to say, not everything has to go through the FDA. Right. Not all products sold in the hospital have to go through an FDA. Some of them are software. Some of them are.
Right. Many of them are not at all.
Yeah. But let's say you even get through that process where you get your 510K or whoever you're getting approval, and you've never actually sat down and wrote your messaging out, right? They've done all of these other things. They've built their business plan. They literally got investors to give them money.
Right.
But they never sat down and did their messaging. And I know they've never sat down and done their messaging because I've asked enough groups like, well, do you have a messaging document? And they go, a what?
Well, let's be reasonable. Okay. Well, let's be reasonable because we tend to be unreasonable. Well, let's be reasonable. Most of these people are not trained in marketing. Some come from sales. Sales is different than marketing, as you and I have talked about. But they don't come with that background, and so they don't I think they sort of don't realize how important it is because no one's ever trained them on it. And then they're like, oh yeah, it's important, but they need to know how to do it. And that's one of the things I want to focus on.
Like, you want to know like the key way that if somebody, like if I was just sitting in a coffee shop, I now I'm just imagining this because this would be so much fun. I'm just sitting in a coffee shop and I'm listening to like two partners in a business go like, we just keep explaining the problem and nobody understands it. And I just poked my head up and I was like, your messaging sucks. And they'd be like, sir, what? You don't even know what we do. And I'd be like, I know enough.
I know what you don't do. You don't do marketing. And wouldn't it be cool if Ryan was in every coffee shop and he just popped up like a prairie dog and said, your messaging sucked and then disappeared?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's a world I want to live in.
Sticker.
But like that's a way to know, like if you're talking about your product and people are still confused, they're not responding, whether it's an email or an in-person or whatever, they're not grasping what you do, right?
Because you never establish it. So like that's the whole most of these groups fix your messaging by establishing your messaging because they never actually took the time to sit down and establish their messaging. Okay. So you used the term before we got on the air saying it's got to stick to their North Star. Yep.
And you talked about Don Miller's a well-known, very famous marketer.
I would encourage everyone to go read his book.
Yeah, I mean, you will learn an incredible amount. I've listened to podcasts. I've read some of his books. They're very well written, and they're actually designed sort of like this video cast to teach people who don't know marketing the fundamentals sort of, because if you pick up the fundamentals, your business will pick up. But you described two things to me. You described a North Star, which I would hold off on. Okay. And the one-liner, right? And so can you give me an example of a one-liner that most people would be familiar with that you can think of?
So we were talking about Dollar Shave Club.
Yeah.
All right. So Dollar Shave Club, their whole concept was that going to the store and buying I don't know if this is their one-liner, but I'll make up their one-liner. Yeah. Hey, Mark, you know how when you grow a luscious beard and you know how when you have to go to the store, you got to drive to Rite Aid or CVS. Yeah. All right. You're going to go grab your blades. You feel like you're stealing something because they have it behind this thing.
Right. It costs like $40.
It costs like 40. You're just like, oh my
God. Is this mug really worth all this money?
You go, now you got to drive back home. And then like 6 months from now, you're going to go shave your face and you're going to go like, I don't have razor blades.
Right. And rinse and repeat the painful experience.
Yeah. Now, if I was doing a one-liner, I'd describe it much, much easier. It'd be like, hey, you know how getting razor blades is a pain because you got to remember to get them and you have to go to the store? Yeah. Dollar Shave Club solves that by sending you high-quality German blades directly to your house on a subscription plan.
Okay, see, that's a really good one-liner. And it's technically a couple of lines, but the concept is problem and how you solve it is simply put so that if people go like, oh, I didn't know that I don't have that problem. Well, they're not a customer of yours anyway. But they're like, yeah, I know, I hate it. Like, I feel like I need to go get somebody who wakes somebody up in the pharmacy to unlock this thing. It's a pain. I hate it.
They hate it. They hate you because you're making
right. But it's Dollar Shave Club. Yeah. So I could have them delivered to my home. How do I know these things are any good? Well, now we're in a conversation. Right? Yeah. Because again, Luscious Beard was my nickname in college, and I don't want to just.
I thought it was Shade Tree. So I'll give you an example for healthcare, right? So OR scheduling software, though I think maybe for ASCs. And you'd be like, you know how scheduling cases is a giant pain. You're trying to remember doctors' block times and get phone preferences.
Make sure the insurance approved.
And everything's done on a whiteboard.
And it's not an EMR, so I got to add it in.
And Sally,
we forgot to call.
Yeah, Sally, who's the OR administrator. Like, she's a whiz, but when she's out, that sucks scheduling cases for the week.
Sounds like you've talked to some ASC administrators.
What's your one-liner? So it would be like, you know how so my one-liner would be, So you know how scheduling OR cases is just a pain in the ass, right?
Yeah,
you never can keep anybody happy. It just never goes. It's a struggle every day at 2 p.m. Our software solves that by doing this, this, and this.
That's it. That's your one-liner, right?
And they would probably go like, how do you do that? And now you can have a bigger conversation with them.
Right.
But from a messaging standpoint, right? Like, what is your one-liner? What is like, there's this North Star,
right?
That everything that you do from a messaging and marketing and like your website or like, does it all point to your North Star? If you can't quickly go like, this is how this links to that.
Yeah. Okay. So the North Star there would be, we make that OR scheduling process easy, right? Like that might be using that example. Dollar Shave Club would say, we get rid of that process and we just deliver it, and you never have to think about it again. And still look great.
Honestly, yeah, like
right?
Dollar Shave Clubs is really like, we make purchasing razor blades easy.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
How do you make it easy? Right.
Yeah. So is that the key? I never thought about this before. You know, you're onto something if people are nodding their head, but it's hard to see that when you send an email, right? Yeah. But they're saying, how do you do it? Like that's kind of an indicator.
And it would almost be like for the OR scheduling, like we eliminate the stress of scheduling.
Yeah. Okay.
Surgical cases.
So
like how do you do that? Well, we have, buzzword. We have an AI powered algorithm that
laser guided
is, so like, but like, we eliminate the stress of that.
Okay, so you think you have a good message. You think you have a good North Star.
Okay.
Because frankly, your North Star is sort of why you designed the thing in the first place. And it's there's usually a problem you've identified, let's say.
Okay.
So you've got a good message. You just nailed a couple of them, all right? And then, so you have to have a message. So a bad messaging is better than no messaging. But let's say you got bad and you're going to good, and then you want good to go to great. What would you say the process is to do that?
You test it, right? You
in what way?
You listen. So like, if you have bad messaging, the reason why I say bad messaging is better than no messaging is because if you have bad messaging, you can at least like, I can sit down with you and I can go, hey, do you have a piece of paper that you have your messaging written out? And you're like, yeah, we have here. People don't really like it. And then I could sit down and look at it and go like, well, what don't people like about it?
Yeah. Okay.
If I said this to you, what do they not respond to? What do they, and we can work off of that. And because I would like, you're probably not super far off. You might be like 30 degrees to the left or the right, but you at least understand that like, hey, we have to have messaging and we have to follow it and repeat it. And you can work off of that. So let's say you get it to good. How would I like? You're just constantly listening and
you're delivering that message and then gauging reaction.
Yeah. So
right?
I'll give you the perfect example, like a real world example of me. I'm sure you did this, or maybe I'm just the most special human being in all the world. But good sales reps do this naturally, okay? And I'm not saying I'm a good sales rep. I was really good at doing this when doing demos, okay? So someone bought something from me or from one of my teammates, and I was going in and I was gonna help with the demo, and you sit there and you do the demo and you go, here's how this works. For one product specifically, I got so good at demoing it because I constantly listened to how people reacted to me, what I said, like all of these things where I could, at the end, finish a demo and go, is everyone good? And everyone would be nodding their head yes. And I would jokingly say, I must be really good at my job.
Right.
Because what I did during the process was I constantly, and I was demoing this, 10 times a week. I would just constantly listen to the questions that I got asked and adjust my demonstration to answer those questions proactively or describe things in ways that I knew people responded to.
So,
and that's how you take good good messaging to great. It's that concept of going like, they're not major tweaks.
Yeah.
They're just minor tweaks of going like, instead of describing like the chaotic nature of scheduling to like, it's just stressful.
Yeah.
Right. And like, they're both really similar. They're probably like cousins of like chaos and stress. They tie together.
Yeah.
But if I describe chaos, it might not be anything. But if I say stress, you might go like, you get that feeling in your heart of like,
yeah. And then you just start describing like, hey, you know how your heart starts to race a little bit, you get the little trickle of sweat and you're like, and you clench up. Yeah.
Like that is how you
design something to sort of eliminate that or decrease that.
But that's how you take it from good to great is like but you can only do it if you establish it. It's like a scientific process.
Well, so it's funny. I know like you can beta test things. It's funny. Social media gives you like you can test messages and watch which people respond to more with really cool data analytics. But old grumpy salesperson who was doing this with a lot of companies. I'll back up. Big companies have already spent $10 million and field tested all their marketing in many ways because they've done market research. Small companies can't do that.
No. So
you go out as a salesperson and say, hey, you ever do this? You ever have this problem? And we solve that. And you watch and it's not because they don't, sometimes it's because they don't have the problem. Sometimes it's because they don't understand what you're saying, but they start to nod. They're like, oh, hey, do you do this? And you start to go, next time I'm going to say this, I'm going to iterate, and you get really good really fast.
I'll give you the perfect. Right? Yeah. And if you don't think big companies don't do it now, they do. I think big companies kind of like there are bad things about it, but like back to your days of pharma.
Yeah.
Did you not get handed probably a sheet that said, you talk about this, you talk about this, you talk about this, you talk about this?
Yeah.
And the reason why is because they knew that if you said those words, maybe even in a specific order, that it would resonate with the doctor.
It's funny, they weren't as prescriptive on that people think, but there was a process, and I'll give it to you real fast on drugs to use as an example. We were always taught efficacy, safety, side effects, cost. Like in that order. Now, you and I could both be good reps, and we might describe efficacy differently, meaning like, hey, it really works well in these patients with high blood pressure and comorbid diabetes or whatever, and works well here. And then you would say something like, oh man, I like how he said that, and I can see people, I'm going to steal that, right? So we weren't specifically told, we were never given scripts, although some people wanted them. We were never given them, but we were given a format, a formula, so that when you went out and did it every day, you were field testing it, not even realizing it. And you were realizing, wait, people are starting to pay attention. They're asked how or why. And you're like, oh, so it's exactly what we were doing. That's why. So back to the messaging, like you're saying you need messaging, you need a one-liner. It needs to go to your North Star, and it needs to be something simple. And then field test it. What's the problem, right?
And I'll even make it there are like a half a dozen frameworks out there, like that have like question prompts. And you can go read a book, and like again, you can go read Storybrand 2.0.
It's a great book.
I don't get paid money for it. I just literally you can go read it and fill out the framework, and then just iterate on it.
Right. Right. It actually lays out the formula.
If you're not even a reader, audiobook. That's me. So you can do that, and then you grow from there. But at least you have it written down, and for anyone out there who's going like, well, this type of talk of messaging is what gets companies in trouble with the FDA for saying stuff you shouldn't say. It's the opposite, actually. Because you're actually establishing your messaging, and you're sitting down and you're thinking creatively, right? Of like, what can I say? How can I describe it? What's the furthest I can and I'm not saying like push boundaries and say things you shouldn't say, but like, what's the best way I can describe this problem that we solve, or like within, like, what is my indication? All right, how would I describe it? What would be the way I would say it? And then if you actually have it down on a piece of paper, and you give it to your entire team, and you go, you stick to this. Don't you ever say something that is not on this piece of paper. You're less likely to get in trouble.
So let me try this. I'm going to test drive one with you here. So let's say I'm a robotic company in surgery, right? And I say, beep boop bop. And I say, hey, you know how when you do those lap choles and you're trying to get to this and you're trying, and it's difficult because the arms aren't designed to this and whatever, right? We design something that helps with that problem. Fully within label. One liner. If they don't have the problem, they're like, oh, cool, I know what you do. I know how you feel like you fix it. We don't need it, right? But everybody's clear. So that would be an example of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, and like,
did I stay within the boundaries?
Yeah, you stay within the boundaries, and like that's a part of it, right? So like when you talk about like if I was going to do like a real framework, right? I'll go through like kind of a variation of like what Donald Miller's thing is. I hope I don't get sued. Would be like
we sold 5 of his books today.
Yeah, I think if anything, I helped. It'd be like what his thing is like, what's your aspirational identity? So what do you want someone to turn into? Like I want to go from a overwhelmed OR manager who struggles to schedule stuff to an efficient OR manager, right?
Who feels like they're on top of things.
Yeah, who feels like they're on top of things. And, he talks about like what problems are you solving, right? So what's the external problem? So people buy stuff because of internal problems, not because of external problems. So like I'll give you the perfect example. You play golf, I don't, okay? Too good at it.
Don't game full time.
So like if you went and played golf and you shanked a ball, okay?
We don't even use that word out loud. Please continue.
You're literally not going to go buy you're not going to go into the pro shop and go like, hey,
trying to avoid that 5-letter word.
Like, hey, I'm trying to avoid that 5-letter word. What do you think I should get? Well, you should get this driver. It takes into consideration this, blah, blah, blah. You're not making that purchase because you shanked it. You're 1,000% making that purchase because your buddies for the next 3 holes made fun of you. I hope that old lady that you almost hit, like that shame that you feel is what is making you purchase that.
Right.
But like TaylorMade knows that.
Yeah.
They don't go like, don't like buy a golf club. Even though like I legitimately like, I think if you sold a driver and you were like, you'll hit this so straight, your buddies won't make fun of you anymore, you would get dudes to buy it.
I've seen ads like that, and I'm like, they're brilliant because that's what's driven for.
But like,
certain...
so like, what's the external problem? The external problem is that you are trying to make 5 surgeons happy in a 10-room OR, and you have all these million things going on. And philosophically, right, what's the philosophical problem? The philosophical problem is that it shouldn't be this difficult to schedule cases. Like it was never this hard back in the day, like whatever. And you're talking about that, but then the internal problem that you're talking about is like stress. So like if I was going to design a website for that, what would my hero would be eliminate the stress of OR scheduling.
So you went sort of 301, 401 level there, which I like, but you pulled it back to the North Star and the message.
Fill out a framework.
And you were explaining why emotions matter.
Fill out, like my thing would be go fill out a framework.
Yeah.
You have to, like that's 1.0. 1.0, that's not 2.0, that's not 3.0, that's literally go fill out a framework. It takes 2 hours to do. You have to sit there, write down questions. Like 2.0 is testing it out. Go fill out a framework, and then any sales copy that you write, your website, literally everything you do. If you can't go to me, if I go to you, hey, does your website match your framework? And you go, no, go fix your website. Yep. If your sales email doesn't match your framework, go fix your email.
So the takeaway of this, very informative, is bad messaging is better than no messaging. So have a message
and then measure
it and like
adjust.
Think of it as what I think the easiest way to think of it is what's a problem, and then
how do you solve it?
How do you solve it, right? And if you just think that's the way you start and you think about it, then you fill out a framework and you take the time. But if you just do those first two steps, recognize we need a message and do this, you're already better today. And then when you call Ryan and say, hey, help me what do you mean this framework? Explain this to me. Then you learn how to do it and you get really good at it. And like Ryan said, the way you really know is you test it. Like there's no magic. You're not pulling this out of the bottom of a cereal box. You got to go put it in front of people who you think are your customers and test it. And you will find out quickly how effective it is. And you will get very effective very quickly.
And big companies do this. So don't think that big companies do this. Big companies do this. They just do it differently, and because they have a massive budget and they can do it differently.
And many times they already know their market so well because they've been immersed in it, as opposed to somebody who's creating a product that it's different.
And I will tell you, they get away. They I compliment. This isn't me shaming. Like they get away with bad messaging. Yeah. They can get away with bad messaging because if you're Medtronic and you bring a new spine product to the market, guess what? Every doctor who uses Medtronic is going to do already, or every doctor that knows what Medtronic is going to do.
Well, they're at least going to look at it because it's new.
And it's from Medtronic.
Right.
But that's not the case. So for other groups, you have to make up the difference with good, impactful messaging.
I like that. I think hopefully this has helped. I think this helps people and small med device companies. And we're Breaking MedTech. We're here to try to help small med device companies get better, bigger, faster, sooner by using simple sales and marketing things that we think are simple, but we've been doing this for decades now. So we're trying to share some of that. So I'm Cope. He's Ryan. We'll see you next week on Breaking MedTech.
Have a great rest of the day.